I mean, that's what I do. I do deals. My whole life is deals. That's all I know is deals. And I know when somebody wants to make it and when somebody doesn't. I will say this, before I came here, there was no communication with Russia whatsoever, and Russia wasn't answering calls. They were not talking to anybody. They wouldn't talk to anybody, and people sort of accepted that as being that they want to go forward and just keep going without stop. But when I got here, one of the first calls I made was to President Putin, and we were treated with great respect, and they want to end this war. So that's a big thing, because I didn't know if I could say that, but it's a big thing. They want to do it, and the group in the front row that I introduced, they're all very active in it, and we're working on deals right now, transactions right now, and in particular, the big one is to get the war stopped, whether it's ceasefire or direct to an agreement. I'd like to go directly to an agreement, but ceasefire will always happen a little bit quicker. And every day you're saving thousands, or at least hundreds, but thousands in some cases, lives. So we want to see if we can get that done.
We need to understand President Trump, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Hegseth, VP Vance, the envoys that were sent to Ukraine 2 weeks ago now have made an incredible impact on this war, which, by the way, for those of you following, today is the 3rd anniversary of the Ukraine-Russia war. So this is the day that tanks rolled across. And now you can sit there and on one side, you hear the mainstream establishment narrative, unprovoked war, unprovoked war, unprovoked war. But of course we all, and of course, by the way, and I'll just say this, right? The war was started when Russian tanks rolled in. That's when it crossed from a disagreement into an actual war. But of course, this iteration of the war isn't the first start of the hostilities between Russia and Ukraine. That began in 2014, when the movement took place in the Donbass to separate and then join and be annexed by the Russian Federation. Why did that take place? It took place because of a plebiscite. Crimea as well, by the way. It also took place because of the overthrow of Viktor Yanukovych, who was the prior president of Ukraine. This is something, by the way, that gets totally lost. People will say, you hear the mainstream, they'll say Yanukovych was pro-Russia. He was a pro-Russian president. He was, he reneged on a deal with the EU. They were going to do an economic deal, and he totally reneged on it. So he had to be driven out of office. And yet, Yanukovych was elected by all of Ukraine. He was Ukrainian. He is Ukrainian. He's still alive. So the fact that he was elected and then driven from office in a color revolution that received backing from the United States, from liberals as well as conservatives. John McCain was over there. Lindsey Graham was over there. Amy Klobuchar was over there. Chris Murphy went over. So you can see this going back and forth. These guys were pushing for the overthrow of the president of Ukraine. They got his overthrow. He flees. It's called the Maidan Revolution, and you can go look this up. And that's what leads to the current situation here, because this process has not been stabilized. I'm not going to say that there haven't been aggression on both sides, but what you have to point out is that every story has two sides to it. Every argument has two sides to it. If you're going to sit there and say, oh, the Russians are this, and this, I'm not even arguing that they're not. But what I am going to say is you have to understand the story from where it began. And that's why President Trump, Hegseth, and the rest of these guys are saying it's a complex situation. It's just that. Like any war, it's a complex situation. Look, I would love if the world worked like a Marvel movie and you got to say, oh, these are the good guys and these are the bad guys and there's nothing else going on. But that's exactly the kind of corporate globalist narrative that they want to put on everything. As it turns out, the real world is a little bit more complicated than that. And yes, there are serious interests at play here. We're talking energy interests. We're talking demographic interests. We're talking seaport issues. We're talking military issues. All of those things, and all of them under the sun and more, went into Russia's decision to begin this war. Okay? All of that went in. But you even have to go back a little bit further than just 3 years ago to understand that who went to the Munich Security Conference just 1 week, I think it was even less than a week, before Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, It was Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris went to that Munich Security Conference, and she was the one pushing them to say, we are going to get Ukraine into NATO. And it was specifically this, that the Russians had said, if you push for Ukraine into NATO, then we are going to wage war. We will invade if you do this. And Kamala Harris went and said, let's go and do that right now.